Hello everyone, Joe from Central Jersey Conrail and N-Scale, and welcome to episode 14. So this episode we're going to be constructing the Mini Helix. So before we get going, I just want to go over a few things. So I keep referring to this as the Mini Helix, and this is not really anything miniature about it. It's a normal size helix. It's about 4.5 turns. We used a full sheet of plywood. We used 16 threaded rods. I used over 200 hex nuts and 200 flat washers. So it is a full-size helix. I'm just calling it the Mini Helix because of the two helixes on the layout here. This would be the smaller of the two. So just wanted to clear up any kind of confusion. So sit back and watch how we put up the helix.
Okay, so here we are getting started. First thing I did is I laid out a template on the floor, 28 inches in diameter. This helped me keep my circle true. Next, I laid out the first level on the floor and put it together. Cut out sections of 11/32 plywood into quarter circles. Using quarter circles, it maximizes your cuts per sheet of plywood. Now I transported the first level and attached it to the base. The base of my helix is just 1x4s in plywood. Once the first level was attached to the base, I drilled through the first level and the base and started inserting threaded rods. Here I'm using a power drill to speed up the process of threading the rods through. I use corresponding nuts and washers to hold everything together. There's nuts and washers on the base, and there's nuts and washers that hold up each level. Here I am setting the height for the first level. So using some math from high school, we have a 28-inch diameter circle. We plug that into the circumference formula and we get 82.92 inches of circumference. Then we take that and we plug that into our rise over run formula and we get a gradient of approximately 2.9% grade. So this is important on the first level because all of your subsequent levels build on the first level. So if your grade isn't set properly on the first level, it'll carry throughout the whole helix. So with my helix, I wanted a 2 inches of headroom, and headroom is defined as the space between the lower level and the top of the next level. The reason I wanted 2 inches of headroom is so that I could run double stacks through the helix. Okay, so here I am finishing up the first level. It's important that you remember to nail down all your track and to install all your feeders before you build the next level, because it'll be very difficult to work in that space once you put up the next level. So to avoid forgetting a step, I worked in small sections. I would only do 2/4 turns at a time. And as you can see, I just laid a section of track. But I'm going back and I'm nailing down the section before that. The section that I just put on the helix, I'm not going to tack down. Here I'm running a test train to test all of the joints. Everybody always says, don't put your track joints on a curve. Well, unfortunately, when you're doing a helix, you don't have a choice. So it takes a lot of work, and you gotta take your time. Here I am installing the next quarter turn. As you can see, I'm using my favorite tool again, the bar clamp. I clamp them together, and then I drill and I put the screws in. And I use another piece of 11/32 plywood to join the two sections. I think the most time-consuming thing on constructing this helix was putting in all the nuts. Here I am installing the next section of track. So I didn't tack down the section before that to leave it free so that I could adjust the curve as I go. It just makes it easier. So from that joint, I'll tack down that joint and I'll work backwards, tacking down that section of track. Here I am installing the track feeders. As you're starting to see, it's a repetitive process. So once I got my system down, I just continued with each step. I'd put in the hardware, then I would install the wood, and then I would go back and do the track, and then I would go back and do the joint, and then I would go and do the feeders, and then I would come back and tack down the track, and then I was ready to go on to the next level. So I don't know how many of you have picked up on it, but that 2x4 got cut. When I was putting up the helix, at some point, I don't know if I think I shifted the helix more towards the front to give the back edge more room, and there wasn't enough room between the helix and that 2x4. And I was not taking down this helix, so I just took out the saw and cut the 2x4. Then I spliced in a 1x4 to keep the strength. The other thing that we kind of skipped over was me cutting the access hatch. Once I got the first 2 levels established and I saw that everything was going well, then I went ahead and cut the plywood and opened up the hole. I made sure to reinforce it, as you can see there, with 1x4s. I built a 1x4 grid around the hole, this way that there was no sagging in the plywood, because I was afraid if the plywood would sag, then it would pull down the whole helix and the helix would lean, kind of like a leaning tower of Pisa. So these threaded rods, as you can see, they're getting out of plumb as I'm going up through each level. I think on my next helix, when I do the big helix, the way I'm going to get around that is I'm going to lay out all the sections of wood on the floor, clamp them together, and drill all the holes so that they all line up perfectly. Because as we were going up each level, we're twisting or bending these rods. Fortunately, I used rods that were kind of thin enough that I could kind of just torque them back into shape. So that's why as we're going up levels, you'll see certain rods kind of kink back and forth. I wasn't too concerned on how the rods looked, if they were bent or straight or not. I just wanted it to be structurally sound and solid, and that's all really the rods were for. I mean, the helix here is not going to be winning any beauty contests, as you can see, but the form and function is perfect. It's level, the grade is constant throughout, the track is smooth, we have no derailments, the engines can climb in and out, so I'll take the bent rods, and I'll take that as criticism. So at this point, all I'm doing now is just I'm bringing up the test tray and I'm checking my headroom on the double stack, and that's what I'm using to set my my levels each time around. So here's another big lesson learned. Up until this point in the helix, I hadn't been going back and tightening up all the hardware. I had this idea that I was just going to go back in the end and just do it all in one shot. But here on my 4th level, I figured if I went ahead and tightened all the hardware, it made everything nice and solid, and it was easier to do my track work, because the plywood wasn't spongy and wasn't bouncing when I'm trying to put in the track nails. Okay, so here you can see that piece of plywood that's kind of up on those 1x2s, and at this point I'm trying to figure out how many more turns I got to go up, and I use that to set my track level, so this way I know where I have to get up to. By the way, Vince, if you're out there watching, that little track tool you gave me, it made those joints go so much easier. So I think one of the great things about this design is all these nuts and washers, even though they're time consuming to put together. After the helix was put together, as I'm testing it, I'm finding little spots where the plywood has either tweaked or kind of bowed or got out of shape, and just by using the wrench you can turn them hex nuts, like 1/4 turn or a half turn, and you can kind of bring that track bed back in the way you want it. So here we are in the home stretch. We're just putting in the last couple pieces for the last level. Yeah, so I probably could have bought a kit and put a kit together and done this that way, but building it myself was really rewarding. Actually, I can sit back and look at it, and I'm very happy. That little black mark on the wall, that's just a little reference for me to know how high the upper level is going to be. So the eventual plan is that the town of Lakehurst in Union Ave is going to be right through the center of the helix, and also the main line will go down to the left of the screen, and then Tom's River Industrial will go to our right. So that's the plan. We'll be covering that next episode, in episode 15, when we start doing our track planning. So I have probably another half-inch more to go to climb, but I'm just going to end it right here and leave it like that until we get the track plan established above, so I know where I need to go from there. Also, at this time, I'm very hesitant to cut these threaded rods right now. I want to wait to figure out what's going to happen above it. I'm afraid if I cut them off, then I'll be like, oh, I wish I had them there for I don't know what, but just in case. So the last thing I did is I installed those 2x2s and then used the cable tacks, and it ran all the track feeders down. This way they're not kind of floating in outer space and they don't get caught on stuff.
Okay, so after last episode at the end, I showed you the first level of the Helix that got constructed. Now, if you look at the last video, the Helix that we just built doesn't look anything like that. Let me explain. This is actually the third time that I built the Helix. The first time after the last video, approximately a week or two later, when I was testing trains, there was a lot of problems with the roadbed. There was not enough support structure. The Helix started to lean. The roadbed started to warp. Trains just were derailing, and I'll be honest with you, it was kind of like putting your trains across a tightrope. It was just, the trains were going across the dark oblivion, and I was afraid something was going to fall. So I needed a better solution. So the second Helix that I built was very similar to the one we just built together, except the roadbed was shaped different. What I ultimately ended up doing with the roadbed is cutting this notch. What happened was, with the original roadbed, I made a circle around, but when I went to put the threaded dowel rods in, the large 89-foot flat cars and auto racks were getting hung up on the threaded rod because there wasn't enough spacing. So my solution was to cut it like this. So that was the second helix. So I had to tear that down. Both of them, I made it up like 2.5 levels, and I just stopped and took them apart and started all over. So the last helix that we built that you saw was the ultimate design. So yes, I went through a lot of trouble to build the helix. Now, a lot of you out there are probably saying, hey Joe, why didn't you just buy a kit? There are a bunch of manufacturers out there who are making helix kits. I don't know, for some reason I just wanted to do it myself and build it from scratch. So the other thing that's come up through testing of the helix is train size. So a lot of model locomotive manufacturers recommend a 4% maximum grade, and they usually give you how many free rolling freight cars that the locomotive can pull up that max grade. Now there's a couple extra things to consider when you're putting up your helix. So the helix was built at a 2.9% grade. However, what you have to consider about a helix is also the radius of the curve. So when a locomotive is climbing up a grade and is turning at the same time, it reduces the amount of pulling power. So throughout my testing, I've determined that a 4-axle locomotive can pull 6 cars up the helix, and a 6-axle locomotive can pull 9 cars up the helix. So when I run a train with 3 6-axle locomotives, that'll give me 27 cars. So 27 cars for a mainline train on the Sayrehurst Secondary is right about where I want to be. So I've been testing the helix now, and it's been running really well and really smooth. I have not had any derailments due to track work. I mean, I've had a couple trains get stuck in the helix, but that was all freight car related because of trucks and couplers, and it's not fun. Of course, as I was telling you when we were putting it together, I did learn a lot when I was putting this one together, and what to do and what not to do for the big helix. So it was actually a good thing that I decided to do the smaller of the 2 helixes for my first one, because now when I go onto the bigger helix, which should be around 9 or 10 turns, I have the process down and I know what to do and what not to do. With that being said, we will cover the construction of the larger helix in a future episode. Okay, so that wraps it up for the construction of the helix, and now we're going to start moving on to constructing the main line from Lakehurst all the way up to Freehold. I may go around the corner through Monmouth Battlefield. We'll take that as it comes. So it leads me to my last point. So shortly after the release of this video, I'm going to go onto my Facebook page and I'm going to do a bunch of changes. The major thing that you're going to notice is I'm going to start adding photo albums. And the albums that I'm going to put up for everyone is going to be based on location. So I'm going to have a photo album for the Toms River Industrial. Then I'll have a photo album for Lakehurst. And I'll have a photo album for Lakewood, and so on and so forth. So what that'll let you do is you'll be able to follow along each location as construction progresses. You know, from bare bench work to the track plan to the sub-road bed and track and so on and so on. So a lot of you out there may be like, well, Joe, I don't go on Facebook. I don't like Facebook. You can still go on the Facebook page and look at the pictures. You don't have to be a member. The only time you have to be a member of Facebook is if you want to comment. So if you're out there and you're watching this video and you don't like Facebook, but you want to check out my pictures, all you have to do is go to Google, put in Central Jersey Conrail and N scale, Google search it, and it will pop up on the Facebook page as the #1 hit. Then all you have to do is just click on that link, go in, and then they have this robot verification where you have to punch in a code that flashes on the screen. And then you can pull up the Facebook page. And then you can browse through the Facebook page to see the pictures that I'm talking about. So that's going to put episode 14 in the books. So I'm glad you guys are following along. I hope everybody picked up some tips. And we'll see you again next time, episode 15.